welcome. My name's Nicholas John Jones. I'm the founder and director of Praxis. The first thing I'm going to say actually is that we're recording this event. I hope that's okay for everybody who's here. Praxis is an arts and culture catalyst based in Oslo, in Norway. What we do is create situations that support development through exchange across disciplines. So we most often deal with a different topic and we bring a group of people around together to explore it. So for example, in this case, thinking about the implications of tourism, socially, economically, environmentally, and thinking about how architects, art, and community can be part of relaunching that or rebuilding it in the future, especially now as we come through the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this event starts the larger project, an urgent situation, rethinking tourism through architecture, art, and community. And the project's got 3 phases. The first is this 5-panel discussions. Then there's an online working group, and then there's a real life residency at Samong Haven in Bali, which hopefully will take place next year. We hope that this talk series is going to set a really strong foundation in which to build the further project. And this, I'd like to say a special thank you to Charlotte Taylor, who's worked really kind of leading the project and developing it this way through, to our collaborators, Rebel Architecture Lab, Don Lawrence, Tanya Torgerson, and Samong Haven. Rebel Architecture Lab's an Oslo-based not-for-profit collective that work at the intersection of arts, architecture, urban intervention, and social science. Don Lawrence is an award-winning architect based in Oslo. Many of his projects focus on the potential for art and architecture to develop place. Tanya Torgerson is an artist whose practice has a strong focus on environment and knowledge systems. And Samong Haven is a socially responsible destination in the making that will prioritize culture, community, and conservation. So the plan for today's session is that each of our speakers will give a short presentation, and I'm going to moderate a discussion with them. And then we open up to questions and discussion with you, the audience. This interface that we're using now, the Zoom webinar function, has a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So actually you can type to mine as we go through at any point, and then we'll look to them to get through as many of them as we can later. So this first session that we have in this talk series looks to establish a strong understanding of the trends and impacts of tourism. Our speakers are Amy Skelding, Kirsi Suomi, and Ketut Karya. Amy is a senior partner at Finn Partners Travel UK, the first travel PR agency with a global responsible tourism practice, and the winner of Best PR Agency at the Travel Marketing Awards 2018, 19, and 2020. Her passion for travel started at an early age as a 9-year-old reporter for BBC Radio 4's Breakaway, and she was named one of TG's Tomorrow's Travel Leaders in 2013. And she now runs a busy PR, digital, and rep team for a wide range of clients, from tourism boards to hotel groups, tour operators, and airlines. Kirsi Suomi is the coordinator of responsible Sámi tourism projects at the Sámi Parliament in Finland. Through her work, Kirsi has seen how the rapid growth of tourism has intensified challenges regarding all aspects of sustainability, especially in the context of Sámi culture, as well as tourism in the Sámi homeland in Finland. Ketut Karya is co-founder and director of Samong Haven, Bali. Ketut has 10 years of experience working in the tourism industry, starting as a trainee in a hotel and working his way up to being manager before co-founding Samong Haven. But to say, getting to know Ketut through his capacity as a hotel manager while I was on holiday in 2017 is actually one of the things that led to this project. Charlotte and I really learned a lot from Ketut, and we became friends, ultimately bringing some of our own experiences from running Praxis together with his ideas to feed into the development of Samong Haven. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to Amy to tell us about trends in the travel industry.
Thank you very much. Let's hope this sharing of the screen works. Has that worked? Yes, brilliant. Number one. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know everyone's very busy. Is it me or is it just remarkably busy at the moment? That has to be a good sign for me that the travel industry is truly on its road to recovery. Last year was a total false start. Can I just check you're seeing my actual proper screen? My yeah.
I've got more than agency aims have changed.
That's the one. Right, good. Just good to have a false start. Just need to double check. So talking of a false start, last year was a false start because we thought we were on the road to recovery, but in that time that it's taken us to return to the starters blocks, we've dusted off, we've reset, and so much has moved on, and that's really, I think, what I want to discuss with you. So just a quick bit of context about who I am in case you're wondering. Let me just tell you about us at Fin. We are global PR agency Fin Partners. We are a PR agency with purpose at our core. We try to balance purpose, people, profitability on a large scale for a comms agency, as we have 22 offices, though a lot of those don't have any people in at the moment. We're over 800 people, lots of sectors, and we collaborate on all sorts of different PR campaigns from culture, arts, sustainability, social impact. And these are my travel clients. I'm part of the UK travel team. So as Nicholas said, we've got tourism boards, so like Singapore, Dubai, my beloved Iceland, Malta, hotel groups from Ibis to Sofitel, airlines, private jets, tour operators like Intrepid. And I work on sustainability and social impact campaigns specifically for clients like Iceland and Singapore, as we see more destinations align their tourism strategy with the sustainability strategy. And in my view, this is where things will become more intertwined as times go on, and kind of government ministries are forced to collaborate as resources become harder to come by, really. Here is a nice pic of my team all on holiday, which we compiled for an award we're up for tomorrow night. But don't worry, I'm not lobbying for votes. There is a kind of smug brightness to all our faces I think we can relate to, and it links to travel, you know, seeing the world and experiencing new things. That's what I love most, you know, inspiring travel, and one day doing a lot of it myself. I used to say I had the best job in the world, and I think I've paid for the hubris with a global pandemic devastating our industry. So onto our chosen topic, the past and present and the key factors of the travel industry. The first thing sounds really obvious, but what does it actually mean to be a tourist? You know, there's a lot of tourist snobbery. Very few people actually want to be a tourist. Believe me, I know I have to write media-worthy copy, avoiding the word altogether. Hence, all travel PRs become adept at finding ever new creative ways of saying traveller, Francophiles, sun lovers, wanderlusters, etc., etc. The word tourist is saved for headlines of the main papers. So think tourists wreak havoc on plane, or tourists left stranded in XX location. But when it comes to aspirational travel, everyone is a traveller and not a tourist. And there's a sense that the tourist observes whilst takes a selfie whilst the travellers kind of experience and immerse themselves into culture. You know, tourists stick out whilst travellers blend in. Tourists complain, travellers are curious and ask questions with an open mind, and tourists are oblivious to the nuances of surroundings whilst the traveller is sensitive and respectful to cultural norms. So let's leave all the generalizations and snobbery about which nations or demographic the traveller versus tourist is from, but I'm working on the basis that most clients I work with want the traveller to spend their money with them, as they're generally like a higher net worth, but also more respectful of their product, be it a hotel, a destination, or a tourist board. And that means it's less impact generally on the bottom line, and works well within the trends we're seeing as we all emerge from a kind of COVID-related travel restrictions. But I genuinely am not naive enough to think that the stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap package holiday doesn't have a place in the world. Far from it. But there is a definitely marked rise against the fly and flop model across the board. And even the giants of the industry like TUI are getting on board with how to offer more meaningful and refined holiday experiences for the more purposeful travel. And so what I've done is I've put together a couple of examples that I've labelled the good, the bad and the ugly to have a little look at. So the good. unashamedly a client, well, sort of, because I look after Atlantic Canada, but also genuinely a shining example of how to do responsible tourism correctly, blending art, culture, architecture, and fairy dust. From first glance, Fogo Island in here looks like an impressive luxury hotel that could easily be in a Bond film on the shore of kind of Newfoundland and Labrador. But when you scratch a little deeper, it's a truly meaningful place that celebrates the local island community and enriches it beyond compare. Created by Zita Cobb, who was born and raised on Fogo Island, the inn operates as a social business, and all surpluses from the inn's operations are then reinvested in the local community. It's an award-winning luxury property designed by a local Newfoundland-born architect called Todd Saunders, and has 29 guests, all featuring floor-to-ceiling windows and offering breathtaking views of the Northern Atlantic. Just so many amazing touches. Fogo Island's furniture, Fogo Island Inn's furniture was designed with kind of using traditional Newfoundland aesthetics in mind, and then manufactured by local craftspeople on Fogo Island. The inn itself sources all food and other products as close to home as possible, and it even kind of it supports only those outside suppliers with kind of jurisdictions that uphold basic labour and environmental protection laws. And then running parallel to the hospitality side of this business are a number of other initiatives led by Fogo Island Art. So the most prominent, probably most famous, is the Artists in Residence programme, which is a scheme that captured the attention of kind of the world's design press, thanks to the other 4 amazing pods that were designed by Saunders, these kind of incredible geometric studios dotted around Fogo's coastline, that really provide a kind of stark contrast between the rocks and the coast and the sky. And then residencies for artists run between a month and 3 months, and they culminate in a talk and exhibition at Fogo Island Gallery, all contained within the inn. So another reason for people to visit. The inn has really quickly garnered a kind of international reputation for exceptional sustainability practices, embodied the place-specific hospitality and bold, thoughtful, humanistic contemporary design. So it's a genuine case of if you build it, they will come. And another wonderful example is Singapore's incredible 250-acre Gardens by the Bay, all part of kind of Singapore's Green Plan 2030, which embodies its aim of becoming a city in nature. So as you'll see here are the super trees. And way back in 1967, when the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew announced his vision of this garden city, this vision of Singapore to become a city with kind of abundant lush greenery and a clean environment in order to make life more pleasant for people, which just seems so ahead of its time when you think of how things were built, in parallel. These colossal new solar-powered super trees are found in the South Bay Garden, and they're these man-made mechanical forest of them. There are 18 of them. They act as vertical gardens, generating solar power, acting as fresh as air venting ducts for the nearby conservatories, collecting rainwater. They generate electricity using something called photovoltaic, I think, systems that convert sunlight into energy. And they are truly incredible. A must experience glimpse into the future. And Lee Kuan Yew himself said that this is going to showcase what Singapore can do for the world, and they'll become the pride of Singapore, and they truly are. And also, from a tourism perspective, you have to go and see them. They are absolutely amazing. Now we're going to look at the bad ones. We have to work on the proviso that no one is perfect, and without sounding like a hippie, we're all on a journey. But there are a couple of obvious examples of bad tourism, and the overcrowded streets of Barcelona that have a detrimental effect on the lives of the people that live there, hence this lovely banner on the balcony. And you have to be pretty pissed off if you spent all that time making that banner. And then places like Cuba, there are the effects that tourists probably can't see, and this is pre-pandemic actually, but the increase in tourism numbers came at the strain on resources, particularly water and food. So in Cuba, it was reported that the food costs went up so much that locals couldn't afford the basics. And then of course there are things like elephant rides and orphanage tourism. Both of them lead to terrible exploitation, and actually my client Intrepid Travel, who really are the good guys of the travel industry, remove them from trips and actually become very vocal about it, because it's a pain point and many people aren't aware of how damaging things like that can be. And then the ugly is unfair, but this is a probably not quite so instantly recognizable city, and hopefully some of you know it. This is Rotterdam, which is consistently dubbed the ugliest city in Holland and sometimes in Europe, or was actually, because let's be honest, it isn't exactly beautiful, but I love Rotterdam. It is absolutely glorious. It was completely obliterated in World War II in about 15 minutes by the Luftwaffe, literally razed to the ground, and there was only a church and one building left. And when it was rebuilt, it became kind of functional and soulless. And the investment in the city over the last couple of decades has been miraculous. And so now this kind of once ugly duckling is transformed into this graceful swan with the kind of, it's been described as having the energy of Manhattan and the livability of Copenhagen. There are crowdfunded bridges. There's this very, very cool McDonald's, a huge wind generator come apartment complex in the works. And as a result of all these initiatives, it now tops the must visit list and is very, very cool. And there's over £200 million planned to spend on green spaces and climate friendly transitions. And it's a one to watch, admire, and ultimately to visit. So then looking at current travel trends, and there are so many, from staycations to the worst words in our English language like bleisure, and sorry for saying it, and for those of you who haven't come across it, it's business and leisure, apologies. But there are plenty, and I've just pinpointed a few that seem to have longevity. The long and short of it is that as we start to venture further afield, it's thought that it will be with more purpose. And by that, I mean that we will be more considered about a trip, as the protocol ramifications are huge, the what ifs are confusing. So that hurdle, once that hurdle's been jumped, many will now look at what the impact their holiday will have on themselves mentally and of course physically, and the world around them. So a sustainable focused trip, even if it means a little touch of it, more farm to table, local lodgings, will be the order of the day. And we've seen many travel companies adjusting their models to suit this. On Monday, EasyJet launched their sustainability strategy, as they know their kind of generation EasyJet customers, aka millennials, are kind of demanding more action in fewer words. Another trend we're seeing that seems to have resonance is reconnecting with nature. So, gardening saw a global boom unlike any other in recent history, and seed suppliers are rubbing their hands with glee. And so the kind of making growing some carrots on your windowsill becomes one of the unlikeliest lockdown trends, but it becomes a symbol of resourcefulness and renewal and hope. And that's what so many people have hung on to. The horticultural rush was born partly out of worries about food scarcity, although how many carrots you're going to make in your window box is to be seen, and partly out of a way to stave off boredom. But there's also a kind of trend towards getting back towards more than just sustainable living. It's in this time of pandemic and uncertainty, getting back to nature makes people feel more grounded. And there have been so many studies that have proven that what painters and poets have been telling us for centuries, you don't have to be Wordsworth or Keats to know that spending time in the great outdoors is good for the mind and soul. So the growing scientific nature of ecotherapy has found strong links between spending time in nature, improved cognitive functioning, more positive moods, and reducing kind of anxiety and depression. Cue lots of forest bathing packages from lots of well-known travel companies in response. And most recently in Cornell, they found that just 10 minutes spent in nature can be enough to lessen both the physical and mental effects of stress. So, as a change might be as good as a rest, the people are looking for kind of more outdoor experiences incorporated into their holiday to recharge our very much depleted batteries. And moving swiftly on, I don't want to use the word bucket list, but I've done it now. So travellers who can afford it are plotting these huge once-in-a-lifetime trips over the next few years, and there's this kind of huge pent-up demand for travel after the drawn-out restrictions. And it's kind of sparked people's reevaluation of what people want from life and what they really want to see. And if you want to see an elephant, the fact that not being able to see an elephant for 2 years is, it's been taken off the table, then you're going to book that. But as people become a bit more mindful, they're probably going to stay for longer periods, take even more exotic sabbaticals, try and blend a bit of work and pleasure. And also the kind of little hopping over to Barcelona's will probably be replaced by saving all that money for one longer trip, these big blowout bonanzas. And we know that bookings are coming in for 2023 for these huge multi-gen trips, huge bucket list trips. And then my personal favourite, and as you'll notice, I haven't actually used the word authenticity or authentic yet, but this is the authentic way to travel, kind of engaging with the culture. So, you know, tourism owned or managed by the local community with the aim that the community directly benefits from that tourism, like homestays, farms tables, working cooperatives. It's all about treading lightly on homes, cultures, positive interactions between guests and their host countries, you know, growing awareness of our impact on the well-being of the places where we take our holidays, and an increasingly kind of popular alternative to the traditional mass market offerings. So community-based tourism essentially seeks to minimize the negative impact of tourism while empowering local people at grassroots level. And there's a kind of value for money element to, you know, the increased awareness of responsible tourism is proving influential in people's decision makings. And, you know, recent reports are saying that 7 in 10 are saying travel companies should make sure that the money they spend on their holidays goes back to helping local people and economies. The shift is real. So what challenges lie ahead? There's the easy one is that we have a world of germaphobes. The hand washing is on epidemic level. We have testing everywhere. We have border control issues across the board. And the thinking is that it will all get easier as tech catches up with people, and some of it will become, dare I say, normal. But the bigger question is about how longer term and further into the future we can balance people, planet and profit, and destinations like Bhutan here and my beloved Iceland are doing just that. So next we're going to hear from Kirsi and then Ketut about their kind of tangible in-depth examples of what's possible. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the discussion later.
Thank you very much, Amy. So yeah, as Amy said, we hand over to Kirsi.
Thank you so much. So the way in which I come into the topic is from the community's perspective. And I also, I start with the representation of the people whose home are visited. So I start with the consequences. So lack of proper and correct knowledge regarding the Sámi and Sámi culture leads often to misunderstandings, misrepresentations, misappropriations, misinterpretations, and misuses, and eventually to misleading politics and misinformed decisions regarding Sámi issues. Hence, the consequences may be far-reaching of how people are presented or represented in tourism industry or in public sphere. These brilliant illustrations I have on this presentation, as well as on our ethical guidelines and also on our website, they made by extremely talented young Sámi comic artist Sunna Kitti. And our project is financed by the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. So I tried to locate the Sámi. I know this map is not good. This map portrays only the part of Saamiland that is in Finland, which is also called Sámi homeland. I hope everyone knows where Finland is, but if you don't, it's in Fennoscandia, and we have borders with Sweden, Norway, and Russia. If I start from the arm of Lapland, which is there next to the man who's waving his hand. So the Sámi are the only indigenous people within the area of the European Union. And Saamiland, more commonly known by its North Sámi name, Sápmi, is the core region inhabited by the Sámi, extending across vast areas in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula in Russia. There are differences in scope, history, and the ways in which Sámi culture and Sámi have been portrayed and utilized and or exploited in tourism in the 4 countries where Sámi traditionally reside. Especially in Finland, we have a long and sad history of decontextualization and misrepresentation of the Sámi and their culture by various actors in tourism industry who most often come from outside the Sámi community. To correct the tourism landscape to be more truthful and just, the Sámi Parliament in Finland adopted principles for responsible and ethically sustainable Sámi tourism on the 24th of September 2018. At the beginning of the project in 2017, to avoid confusion and misunderstandings, we divided Sámi tourism into two subcategories. That is tourism based on Sámi culture, which means that the tourism service providers come from within the Sámi community. And then there's that tourism exploiting Sámi culture, where the product providers come from outside Sámi community without actual connection to the community in question. Nowadays, responsibility is often understood as means to realize sustainable tourism. That is, responsibility is the journey, whereas sustainability is the destination. For us at the Sámi Parliament in Finland, responsibility is direct responsibility towards the Sámi society, community, family, Sida, and or any unit concerned who are the guardians, custodians of utilized culture or the lands used in tourism. The future we don't want, and unfortunately in some parts of Sámi homeland in Finland, this is also the yesterday we did not want and definitely don't want it back. The pre-COVID uncontrolled tourism and constantly increasing numbers of visitors arriving to Sámi homeland in Finland caused increasing amounts of challenges that were not manageable or solved. In this illustration, the traditional livelihoods of the Sámi have been forced to retreat due to tourism. The safeguarding of the cultural practices and traditions of the Sámi not involved in tourism have failed. Instead, the everyday lives and festivities of local communities have ended up as tourist attractions against the wishes of the local people. The only thing in this image that has not yet taken place in some parts of Sámi homeland, of course, this is a collation of the issues around Sámi homeland, is the construction of the Arctic Railway. However, for a decade now, the threat of the railway has been looming over the future, causing anxiety, concern, anger, and other negative feelings. The demonstration for housing situation has not taken place yet. However, there have been demonstrations regarding the misappropriation and exploitation of Sámi dress in mid-90s and 2008 in Rovaniemi, organized by the Sámi youth. Reindeer is one of the important cornerstones of Sámi culture, and it has an important role in chain of cultural transmission. Reindeer is also one of the important tourist attractions and marketing components in tourism in Lapland, along with snow and northern lights. Imagine that each leg of the reindeer calf represents one component of sustainability and also carrying capacity. So there's one leg for ecological, one for cultural, one for social, and one for economical sustainability and carrying capacity. If even one of the legs is missing, the calf is crippled. Our first question is, what chances of survival there are in nature for a crippled calf with one or more legs, injured or missing? And furthermore, who wants to come to see a crippled reindeer calf? Therefore, all the legs, that is all the components of sustainability and carrying capacities, need to be there for the reindeer calf to have a future. For indigenous people around the world, is there more than a choice between stereotypes and or misrepresentation or utter invisibility? Is there room enough for anything else? When we deal with othering or representation of the other, has the so-called other right to move only within a allowable difference? In this case, the quote in Twitter, this is it was 2019 when Dior advertised new perfume, Savage or Sauvage, excuse my French, it doesn't exist. And it was marketed with the help of Johnny Depp, a Native American dancing in full ceremonial attire, and a lady from the First Nation. I think Dior thought that they did well, but actually the attempt went totally wrong. Hence, underlying there is that important question of who can decide how respect is shown, and who controls the narrative that creates the representation of the people whose homes the tourists go to visit. We've had in Finland over decades, 40, 50 years, there have been various ways of misrepresenting the Sámi. So we collected or divided these misrepresentations into more or less 5 categories. And those are cultural identity theft, cultural appropriation, invented traditions, borrowed traditions. And these 4 first categories, they represent touristic exploitation of visible elements of Sámi culture, or elements that supposedly, if you believe the tourism industry, are marketed belonging to Sámi culture or to Sámi homeland. And then there's that 5th category of stereotypes, exoticization, zooification, and primitivization, which is those distorted ways of representing the other that are typical for indigenous tourism. And often these images are created and maintained by outsiders, or how in this case, the Sámi people are seen and treated. And that image does not correspond to today's reality or the way in which the Sámi themselves see their people or community. Invisibility. I wanted to touch this topic a bit more because this is one of the current challenges, especially when nature tourism has increased a lot in all of the countries where there's anything that can be called nature. So what may be wilderness for a visitor is home for the local Sámi people, and for many also a source of livelihood and or subsistence economy unconnected to tourism. Wilderness, if it were wilderness, untouched wilderness, it would be void of people, their livelihoods, their cultures, their very being, void of anyone's presence that needs to be taken into consideration or respected. So instead, we rather talk about living cultural landscape and peaceful coexistence of all its beings. So the future we want, this is based on the vision we have on our ethical guidelines. And following the vision, the traditional livelihoods of the Sámi are viable and profitable. Modern livelihoods, such as responsible and ethically sustainable tourism based on Sámi culture, support the profitability of traditional livelihoods and promote employment locally. In the vision, the everyday lives and festivities of the Sámi community, as well as the land use in Sámi homeland, have also been successfully coordinated with the needs of tourism, while primarily securing and respecting the rights of the Sámi and their culture. So more information can be found on our website, and I can post it to chat later on. So I think I used my 15 minutes. Thank you. Kiihtu, takka, spassed. Those are the three Sámi languages spoken in Finland, which is North Sámi, Kiihtu, takka is Inari Sámi, and then spassed, Skolt Sámi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsi. And Ketut,
yeah, thank you so much for the time.
that's working.
Yeah, it's working. You can see it?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so Om Swastiastu, greeting from Bali. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I'd like to thank to Nicholas John and Charlotte from Praxis to organizing this program. I'm proud to be part of this talk series, past and present, to things the travel industry for future. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ketut Karya. I am from Pemutaran village in Bali, Indonesia. Pemutaran is located in northwest part of Bali. So it's here. And about 4-hour drive from the airport, the city in Bali is in the center of Bali is Denpasar area. So it's from Denpasar to Pemutaran is about 4-hour drive. My background is hospitality. I was work in tourist industry for 10 years. Begin with training in one of the big hotel in my village for 1 year and get opportunity to be a reservation agent for 3 years. Upgrade to online reservation manager for 3 years in same hotel. And also get an opportunity to handling small hotel being an operational manager for 3 years. So talk about Pemutaran, where I live. Pemutaran is known for being one of the best places for diving spot in Bali. It is home to the largest artificial bio-rock reef project in the world, a project that received the UNDP Equator Prize in 2012. Talk about Pemutaran in the past. Pemutaran before becoming a tourist destination. Most of the people in Pemutaran originally come from Karangasem, East Bali. So it's back to the map. So it's from here, Karangasem. The Mount Agung eruption, they moved to Pemutaran. At that time, the Pemutaran area was still largely jungle and part of the West National Park. The village is spread out in smaller separate community. Some living in the mountain area and some close to the coast. The daily activity were farmer and fishermen. Pemutaran is very dry village before. The farmer only relying on the rain to start for farming, which will start on October every year. And the fishermen using a traditional wooden boat we call jukung to sailing for fishing, and which is not too strong enough when the big wave and the sea breeze happen. Therefore, Pemutaran was one of the poorest village in Bali, from 636 village, because of the income of the community was under average. Community in the past having some difficult situation, including starving. The village in the driest part of Bali, and many people suffered from starvation when crops were failing because family relied on farming and fishing. And the second is drop out or not school. Many children drop out of the school or they never entered because of the difficult economic situation. So most of the children is the elementary and also the junior high school. And also the illegal lodging and illegal fishing. Some residents start illegal fishing using bombs or cyanide to catch more fish quicker, and illegal lodging to earn enough money to survive. This has happened on my parent too when I was a child. Then if talking about Pemutaran in person, so Pemutaran after becoming a tourist destination, Pemutaran in 2005, many hotel and dive shop opened in the area. At that point, most of the tourists come from Lopina. So maybe back to the map. So where is Lopina? Lopina is around here. It's Buleleng here. So the tourist destination in the north of Bali, the first famous is Lopina. So then Pemutaran. So it's from Pemutaran to, from Lopina to Pemutaran is for 45-minute drive. The tourists, most of them do dive at Menjangan Island, and they often stay overnight in Pemutaran. Year by year, Pemutaran become more famous as a travel destination in Bali because of the coral restoration project. This is the coral restoration project in Pemutaran. And this project is run by a local people, a local community. When the Pemutaran become a tourist destination, so the economy level is increased. Most of them end up working in hotel and dive shop. Some local people start their own business to earn money from tourists by selling handicraft and open warung. We call warung like a small restaurant. Education level is in the community increase, as the average community education was at high school level or maybe under one, and many are gained diplomas and even bachelor degrees. So on this, on after Pemutaran become a tourist destination, some of children can going to be working in cruise. The cruise also is can be training and get bachelor degrees. As Pemutaran developed, the lifestyle of the local community become more modern. The mindset of the community and the younger generation has is increasingly opened up due to the interaction and influence with the foreign culture. As in many cases, tourists also brought some negative impact to Pemutaran, including first, a lot of garbage. Bali has no or limited recycling for garbage. More people put pressure on the existing system. Also, the second, traffic jam. Our roads are not built to handling so much traffic, especially on July until September. It could be 2 till 3 hours stuck on the traffic because of on that period is a high season or a peak season in Bali. And the third is various damage disruption to the three pillars of Trihita Karana, the spiritual guidance to way of life in Bali. This include Palemahan is mean human relationship with nature. For example, change to the land and nature when building are replacing rice field and forest. Pawongan is mean human relations with each other. For example, the sense of mutual cooperation we call gotong royong has spread among the local community. And then last, a parahayangan, a balanced relationship between human and God. For example, the loss of the sacredness of place in Bali. Also, today, a low number of local people study Balinese religious literature. Yes. I put some image here, like tourists sitting on the temple. So it's it in Bali we are very believing with the God. Therefore, is this it meant in the last like destruction between relationship between human and God. Regarding the COVID-19 effect to pemutaran, starting the news of COVID-19, some hotels were still open for a couple of months in Bali. We never thought the situation would prolong for such a long time. There are three things affect regarding the COVID situation in pemutaran, including first, professional change. No tourists mean that hotel and dive shop had to close, and many workers were laid off. People in the local community are confused by the situation as income is not proportional to expense, especially those who work in the tourist sector. Today, salary is not sufficient to finance the necessity of life, including education. To earn money, some people have switched back to farming, fishing, and some open online food business, but many are unable to because they don't have the skill, land, or equipment. And the second, behavior change. To survive and control the situation, the community start to think to have a side job or find an alternative work out of the tourist industry while waiting for tourists to recover. Wherever the situation never thought of before, even though Bali has been down from terrorist bomb Bali on 2002 and 2004 and Mount Agung eruption issue. So it's Bali is already have remaining about the for the tourism industry. And the third, reduce air pollution and garbage. Some positive observation as people are returning to farming, the condition of the land that was previously barren has now become green again. Was that previously filled up has become less due to decreased tourist activity. The community are looking toward a new normal and they hope tourists will soon come back to Bali. Yeah, regarding the COVID-19, it has learned us a lot about the life. I think COVID-19 has been a time to reflect and think, like what we have in Balinese Hindu, to once a year for Nyepi Day, or we call it a silent day. Please allow me to introduce about the celebrate Nyepi in Bali. Balinese people do some tradition. In one day before Nyepi, there is ogoh-ogoh or Gian Dol, Gian Parade. It's like this on the street. And After parade, the end of time, they will be burned. They will be burned this giandol. So this parade means to burn the bad thing or negative thing on human life of year that has passed. Also, there's a several ban on Nyepi Day, including no fire or fire element. People not allowed to make a fire or a cook at home. On the electricity, so no lamp, and transportation is stopped, including the airport is closed. So like this, so there are two people on the road. We call Balinese police. These are pecalang. So they only they can stay at the road to control the situation. So all is empty. The activities stop. So no work. People should rest and stop their activity at that time. No traveling and no having fun. People should stay at home and no make any noise. It's mean like more in meditation and keep calm or one day silent to think about the life of a year that has passed. Therefore, if compared with the situation right now, where we should keep calm and stay at home for a quite long, it will be similar what Balinese do in every year. So COVID-19 make us to think about the world and our place within it to create a better world in the future. So I think that is also important for the travel industry. Bali need to restore its identity, and we need to think about how to help restore it by going back to our tradition and culture and the concept of a Trihita Karana. I will conclude for future challenge for the travel industry in Bali, which one of the Samong Haven concept. So first, culture. Developing and preserving Balinese culture by appreciating and empowering local Balinese tradition, skill, and product. With this, Bali will always have a soul. Second is community. Improving the quality of local community competitiveness in the field of education and entrepreneurship to support the local travel industry, such as sandang, is people can make a clothing, pangan, so it's a food, and papan is a residence or homestay. And third, conservation, maintaining environmental sustainability in the term of looking after local flora and fauna. Take into consideration waste disposal, energy and water usage, forest and marine conservation. By this, we can keep the balance of the nature. Yeah, well, that is I can share about the past and present, the tourist industry in Pemutaran. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ketut. Really interesting. And so as we now kind of step over into the moment of asking some questions and having a discussion together about this, I actually want to kick off, thank you, Ketut, with going back right to the beginning of Amy's presentation, where you talked about how kind of negatively received the word tourist is, and how in fact you know like all these other words are created instead. But yet, why do we think that the title tourist is so uncomfortable to bear compared to traveler, backpacker, globetrotter, or as you mentioned, wanderluster?
It's just about the nuance of what a tourist is. You know, if you asked someone to draw a tourist, they'd draw someone with a kind of baseball cap on and a backpack or what they call a bum bag or a fanny pack,
Socks and sandals,
and would be standing and pointing at things. And you see nowadays, I don't know if everyone saw the brilliant campaign by New Zealand last year, where they basically stopped. They said you're not allowed to take selfies here, and there were just someone like standing. Anytime anyone took a kind of one of those shots where they stand like this on the edge of a cliff, they were like, no, you're not allowed that here. It's all part of the same thing, you know. Don't be an influencer that just takes photos of kind of pretty beaches and not actually have any understanding of it. And it's all tied to the kind of, you know, anti-tourist trail, which is that experiences and not things make you happy. Experiences and not what it looks like on your IG grid makes you happy. And I think that's where the kind of, if you were to become a bit more ephemeral, you would look at the fact that the baby boomers showed wealth by having a TV in their bedroom, and you look at the next generations on and they don't want any of that rubbish in their lives. They want to go and see and do things. You've got great kind of thinkers out in the world, like, you know, there's a chap called, a futurist called James Moorman, who talks about how time and how to spend it and what makes you truly happy, and all of those things that a tourist embodies, which is buying a magnet, taking a photo somewhere, you know, not being part of the culture of a destination. That they embody all of that, and that's the negative side of tourism that you don't want. What you want is the person who comes and feels enriched and enriches that community. And that's where, you know, depending on what, even the tabloids, they want to be involved in that side of tourism, not just the kind of thinkers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point, and it was something actually, as we developed this project, the word tourism is used quite extensively, and it was we had this kind of discussion about like the negativity of tourism and like the specific aim to kind of try and take that head on and think about what it is. But I totally agree that, like, you know, there's the idea of travel versus tourism, and that as you look to
the pandemic
reinvent this. Sorry, go on.
The interesting thing is the pandemic has made people reset and realize that whilst everyone complains about tourists because they are annoying, they come and they point and they want to see things, and, you know, there's this idea that they ask questions. Well, yeah, but sometimes you don't want to be asked questions, but they're important. You look at a lot of my destinations need the tourists, you need them, but you just need the right ones. And actually sometimes tourists don't realize they're being culturally they don't realize they're being rude unless they're told, you know, there's this path to righteousness. That's why you've got places like the Palau Pledge or Icelandic Pledge that are asking people, you know, please don't stand on that bit of volcanic ground, because, you know, Ed Sheeran did it. He was told not to and he burned his foot. It's really stupid. You don't know you're being stupid because you haven't dealt with volcanoes before. I get it. So it's all about us kind of having this conversation and educating each other and saying, well, this is the kind of thing that tourists want to see, and these are the kind of things that are possible from the tourism, from the destination. You know, we've seen a lot of destinations it's looking pretty bleak out there because there are no tourists spending their money.
Well, and I think, you know, Ketut, you told us about how the lifestyle has become more modern and like people have more access to education due to tourism. But you also talked about that, you know, infrastructure is pushed, the waste management is difficult, the roads can't quite always keep up with the number of people. So, you know, and the aspects of life, the relationship to nature and the relationships between people have changed. Do you think that people are more comfortable and happier now than they were, you know, before tourism came? And how do you see those balances? Okay.
Yeah, infrastructure for voice is still an obstacle and require to cooperation from many sector for handling on that voice management. And for behavior change, some people are aware of this change and start to improve right now. So for comfort and happiness, it's about personal, a person personality. So, but from my side, so I think right now is people are comfort, but not happy.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, I think both in Kirsi and Ketut's presentations, you know, you talking about communities that have very strong kind of cultural heritages and identities, but at the same time that perhaps people travel to see or to be alongside with like a certain exotic kind of lens, perhaps. And I wondered about kind of the relationship between what tourists come to see and how people actually live, and whether that the tourist industry can actually be kind of something that's almost like stopping development within a community. Now that might be different in Bali, but like, you know, how the idea that people are coming to experience something actually influences how that culture itself presents and develops. Maybe Kirsi, you would have, I think Ketut, you and Kirsi might have different takes on this, but Kirsi, what would you think about that?
I think what usually happens, because well, Sami people have very strong identity, and the traditional livelihoods are not as strong as they could be, but they still strong in the society, and they always, the Sami have adapted to different situations. So I think the problem could be from the tourist or the visitor's perspective, when their expectations are not met. Of course, the local people feel frustrated when they over and over again need to explain that, no, we do live in houses, we do drive cars, we use the modern like snowmobiles for herding. But that's sometimes it's like I mentioned, that allowable difference, that how far can it go, how active role the Sami people can have, because I've heard so many times that, oh, we have to produce this practice that for tourists because there's demand for it. But not often enough do I hear that we have to, or we do want to share this with the visitors. This is our perspective. This is what we want to share. And it's because the image of the Sami in tourism business has been, its roots are so deep. Like in Finland, one of the issues is the representation of the Sami, almost in tourism equals the Sami dress, up to the point that one is not considered Sami if they do not wear the traditional clothing. And if someone has something that tourists think that resembles it, it's taken for granted that actually it is Sami product, even though we had that cultural identity theft, which I mentioned, which unfortunately has been going on for ages, that non-Sami people dress up in a fake Sami clothes that resembles the dress, and they then pretend to be Sami for the tourists, for commercial purposes purely. And of course, because they don't come from the community, they don't know the stories, and then they just make up stories, which does not give, or it's not beneficial for the Sami, because there's so little information. There was just a recent study how little the maturity even in Finland know about Sami issues, because it's not in the textbooks for children. So it's, and of course tourists can't know which is authentic and which is unauthentic or fake image of the Sami. So it's extremely complicated. But as has been said already, tourism is important, but it should be balanced. It should be balanced, that there's room for the culture to maintain, develop, and to continue to be transmittable for the future generations without negative effects, and still room for tourism, which is respectful towards the place where people go to visit and the culture of the people in that place. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
well, I think you answered it and took it a little further. So, but I wondered if, I mean, listening to you, and I was actually thinking about this during your presentation as well. I mean, would you see tourism as actually a desirable thing for the Sami in Finland, or do you think it would actually be better if people weren't traveling?
No, definitely it's a desirable thing. And actually, the seminar I came from today was about discussing the boundaries or the limits, where they should be, that what should be shared and what is the kind of like belongs to the cultural ownership of the Sami and doesn't need to be shared, because not everything needs to be commercialized. But at the moment, it's the time in Finland to have the inner discussions, whether it's about handicrafts and where are the limits or the boundaries of whose handicrafts, where's the inspiration and where's the ownership, which belongs where. And those are extremely complicated things, but those are in great need, and there's so many gray areas. So this is actually a very topical issue, but definitely it's desirable. But Sami Parliament has had the opinion that it should be small in scale, longer stays, slow travel, and not just hop in, hop out kind of thing. And also that it takes into consideration all those aspects, that how many people one place can support before for example, social tolerance levels are exceeded. Thank you.
And I mean, Amy, do you think that many tourism providers are engaging in long-term as well as short-term thinking? So, that they're thinking about long-term sustainability rather than just short-term profit. And I mean, I think you gave us some examples of best practice, but I'm thinking about it more generally within.
Yeah, I think you have to be realistic about the fact that so many jobs have been lost and people are trying to recoup what they lost, and so many people have gone out of business. So there is that very fine balance of getting it right. And some, I can see some aren't, some are trying to just make things really expensive. But you look at a place like Bhutan that I ended on, but I didn't actually give an example, I didn't have time, but I can do it now. But they have a daily tariff, a tourism tariff, where I think it's $250 or $200, something like that. It's not cheap, but the point is it keeps, I don't look after Bhutan, so I can say what I like, keeps the riffraff out. It keeps good spenders in. And 30% of that tariff goes towards community projects. It goes towards kind of environmental protection. It goes towards all the good stuff that makes for a better society, that then makes Bhutan, it tops the happiness list over and over, not because, they're being all given out lollies, it's because they have a lovely lifestyle. And so that's where tourism is improving the lifestyle of the people around them. And the government has that as kind of like, I look after Belize, and the sustainability strategy is the same as the tourism strategy, because they look to their left and right. They look at Costa Rica, and Costa Rica is an incredible destination. But what they've done to some of the way they've let some of the big chains in, or what they've done to some of their coastline is like, it's eye-watering. So people are learning from other countries' kind of, missteps. Whilst they're trying to kind of backtrack a bit, some other countries that weren't as well developed are doing things with a kind of sense of purpose, and as Ketut was saying, like taking stock and looking at what's better. But there are loads of companies that are looking, in the pandemic, there was a company in the UK called Charitable Travel that launched that they basically take their commission and they put it in towards a charity. And that's doing really well. It's one of those that in the middle of, not many companies are surviving through travel companies are surviving through a pandemic, let alone launching a pandemic. There are people that are trying. So, there are a lot of B Corp businesses, but there aren't actually that many travel B Corp businesses. There are probably about, I don't know, maybe less than 10 travel B Corp businesses in the UK. So all the B Corp.
Just for anyone who doesn't know, B Corp is it's okay. Yeah, B Corp is a kind of stamp of approval that you're doing things right.
It's the gold
basically.
standard of kind of being a responsible business. So you've got really big ones like Ben & Jerry's a B Corp business. Patagonia is. Body Shop is. Food to Go. No, what's it called? The one, well, it doesn't work if I can't remember the name. But anyway, some really kind of really big names that are doing sensible things and it's really hard to get as well. This is accreditation, it's hard work. All the Travel by B Corp businesses got together and started sharing what they knew to try and, there's no good being the best if you're the only ones. Like, actually want more people on board. So that's when you're seeing a bit more collaboration, a bit more sharing, because there's no planet B. So that's where people are starting to kind of change that kind of focus on profit and more towards, well, if we can share a bit of the knowledge, then we can all benefit from the profit, because we all lose out otherwise. So there are some really good examples out there.
And I think I need to tie that in with these questions, the broader questions of the series, thinking about culture and architecture and kind of thing. I mean, if we talk about, I think it seems like perhaps all of you in some ways are talking about like fewer people traveling, maybe people traveling less often, but when they do, investing more in that travel, maybe staying, like Amy, you talked about people traveling for a bit longer, maybe like tying it in with some work, things like this, or it being like these kind of once in a lifetime type trips. Now, like how do we think about how the spaces that are being built for people to stay in, how the relationship comes to suit this kind of tourism, and and how it like reflects on the places where it is built. Do you have any take on that, and maybe dropping that back to you, Amy, in relation to what you're talking about?
Sorry, what's the question? I wasn't.
So thinking about where I think all of you are kind of talking about, and picking up on what you were just saying about, essentially kind of keeping the riffraff out, that kind of thing, that you have more exclusive travel, or that people are traveling. Maybe it's not so much about keeping the riffraff out, but it's actually that when people are traveling, they really commit to that travel and it becomes a very special experience, rather than like, oh, I can go on a package holiday because it's cheap, therefore I will travel. More like, I really want to travel, I want to experience this, is important for me, therefore I will invest in this experience. And I think that those two options lead towards a different kind of design, a different kind of architecture, a different kind of. So I'm just thinking about how, in this case, buildings, as people are thinking about designing spaces that relate, like, how that kind of comes into play.
So I think that when people either go to a destination to see a destination, or they we talk about destination hotels, like, Ketut's in an area where people want to go to Bali, but when they go to Bali, you either are a backpacker kind of just having the Bali life, or you go somewhere so amazing. And that's the opportunity in places like Bali to actually give and make sure that you're an eco-conscious hotel, that you then embody the vibe, because your destination aligns with what people already want. So they will look to see, and we're seeing it more now, we're seeing it in searches from our research team, that people are looking at sustainable holiday accommodation options. You're going to see it more in how, I just did a video content campaign with Malta, and it was targeting the over 50s market, and one of the things the videographer was saying is that she needed to make sure that she had a green Malta section, because that's what she keeps getting asked for each destination. So I think that when you're looking in kind of how that relates in, and I think of architecture in terms of accommodation for holiday, journalists are asking about it, and media are covering it, to be like, you will have top 10 hotel accommodation, sustainable accommodation providers, you'll have those lists, but also it will be almost part and parcel it's going to be one of the questions that comes up when you're interviewed. And so no longer can you ignore it. And I had a client who called out a cruise company, obviously, because they're cruises, for the use of single-use plastic. And COVID isn't going to be a good enough excuse anymore. We're 18 months into it now. So I think that if you're a wholly sustainable hotel, designed hotel, ideal. And if you're not, you'd better be smartening up your app pretty quickly, because it's now becoming a standard that people expect it. So I think that's how it kind of falls into it. It's almost becoming an expectation, and then anything above and beyond is better. And don't do carbon offsetting because it's nonsense.
And then I wonder, I was kind of interested in your presentation to hear a little bit more about the kind of tourism that you would like to see in Pemuteran, and how that balances with daily life or life of people living there.
Yeah, according to the geographical location of Pemuteran village, where Pemuteran is the mountain and the sea is close together, and Pemuteran has introduced the beautiful underwater potential already. So the world already know about that. So what we have not yet developed is the forest or a land potential, where there's a culture and nature are very closely related. So this is very interesting if can be combined. So therefore, if the type of tourists want to be expected in Pemuteran, for me is a type of tourists who are interested like adventure, like trekking, hiking, something like that. And yeah, for sure is diving and a spiritual tourism like yoga, meditation, and yeah, maybe this kind of good also about the edu tourism, so educational. So maybe in Bali have like Sanskrit, how to make Sanskrit word on the palm leaf, something like that. So there are or educational of the culture of Bali, and yeah, it's we already do like the biorock. So people, some of university, they come visit Pemuteran to educational about how to grow in the biorock, and also how they can supply from the electricity, something like that.
And I mean, I know from talking to you in the past that you're quite passionate about Balinese culture and about, like, as you talked about the Trihitakana and the kind of the pillars of the culture, and like also the way that community interact and like the values. And so I know that, like, from conversations we had, that you're really interested, like, yes, in kind of educating, or like, it's kind of strong word for it, but sharing those values, and that actually as a kind of draw in itself, that's both kind of keeping perhaps what you see as like the best of Balinese culture, but also actually making something can be shared at the same time. It's interesting. And I think it's sort of been touched on it in the talk about the relationship between words and action has kind of come up. And this, like, maybe particularly in your talk, Amy, about like, and how, I mean, Kirsi, you talked about how difficult it is for a visitor to know when they're experiencing something genuine and when they're experiencing a fraud, you know. And similarly, Amy, you kind of have sort of touched on, in a way, like the idea of maybe greenwashing within the industry, although you didn't use quite that word. But like, yeah, I mean, how prevalent is this in the industry, and is there anything that people can do to try and avoid sort of, you know, falling into a trap of greenwashing or like fraudulent situation, rather than like, yeah, there's sort of a genuinely more sustainable and culturally meaningful and appropriate experience?
Was it for me, the question?
Well, it's kind of between you and Amy. Sorry, guys. This thing about not being in the same room and looking each other in the eye.
Okay. I can go first, if that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. The one of the major problems is we are at the moment in process of providing visitor guidance or visitor guide when we use the ethical guidelines and the images of Sunna Kitti, which we have 30 plus altogether. But the biggest problem is lack of resources, both time-wise and financial-wise. That we don't actually, at the moment, we don't have money to use professionals to help us with the guides. We've been thinking about quizzes and everything. There are plenty of ideas, but unfortunately the resources are not enough for doing them. So I think the biggest problem is that how to actually then spread all that information to the people who come to visit, especially in our case, because quite many people come overland. And because we accessible to various directions by plane, but also by overland from not only from southern Finland, but also from especially Norway and Sweden. And it's not like the nationals from there wouldn't know the situation here, but it's also a lot of, in the summertime, there are a lot of people with their caravans when they go around and travel. And so it's how you reach those people. And also, I think it's also about, because this would require an attitude change to start sort of like rebuilding the ways in which people have used to being able to use the resources of the Sámi or the culture of Sámi or the lands. And we also have this everyman's rights in Fennoscandia, in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, where basically everyone has right or freedom to roam, except they always talk about just rights, but not about the responsibilities it brings. And those are quite debated issues as well. But that educational tourism Ketut mentioned, I think that would be so important. But of course, you don't reach all the people who are there. So I think it's just that how I wish that the tourism will be back is that people are more responsible and kind of like try to do the homework beforehand. They visit any places because different places they go to. But then again, we should be able to provide that information as well. Because where do you get the model of a responsible tourist in a specific place unless someone gives you that information? And I think that's when it comes to down to resources, but it's extremely difficult question to answer, but extremely important one. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy.
So if you're thinking about destinations, there are places you can go. You can look on UNWTO, you can see, you can look at the kind of Global Sustainable Tourism Council, you can look at the World Travel and Tourism Council, I think they're a council as well. And you can look at a couple of trusted sources. There are a couple of journalists that I rate: Juliet Kinsman's sustainability editor, Lisa Grange's sustainability, Richard Green, people that actually know their stuff, and avoid all greenwashing, and be very careful of any kind of headline grabbing things because it's probably nonsense. We apply a kind of honest and modest rule. So anyone who's making huge statements about reducing carbon by X, Y, Z, it's just nonsense. It's not going to happen. And unless they're carbon offsetting to such a degree that then actually when you want to know where they're carbon offsetting to and when those trees are going, nonsense. It's nonsense if it's a massive figure. Unless it's something so incredibly technologically advanced like the Climeworks and Carbfix kind of basalt decarbonisation in Iceland, unless it's something like that, and then it's not tourism. So I would apply a fair dollop of common sense and salt to what some people are saying. If I were booking my own holiday, I would look at who is a B Corp because it's really hard to get that accreditation. I would go with, potentially, if you were looking at a package of sorts, you would go with a company like Responsible Travel that really does measure and analyse its impact on people, place, planet. And I would start asking tricky questions. I like a travel agent because they know what they're talking about. And if you start asking questions, because the thing about holiday is it's such a lot of money and it's such a lot of time that actually spending a couple more days researching and asking questions and asking for the answers is worth it in the long run, because that money makes a big difference and you don't want it in a fat cat's pocket. They're fat enough.
Thank you. And then my final question before we open up for questions from our audience is, I think probably going back to Kirsi and thinking about, in the context of the work that you've been doing, how and the community that you work with, kind of how have art, design, architecture been used in positive or negative ways?
There's a big sigh, because I hope that I could provide some extremely positive examples. Well, I do have to say it's outside of Sámi tourism. There are some brilliant architectural touristic compounds, like I don't know anything about their sustainability, but I think that Tree House in Rovaniemi has gained a lot of at least a lot of space in papers, but unfortunately we go back to the old bad examples. Well, let me provide an example of heavily marketed non-native touristic architectural construction, what belongs to the category of borrowed traditions, that is igloos. I don't know if you ever seen, but one of the most famous images of Lapland in Finland is it's about those glass igloos. I think it's been to some UK papers, that 10 places you want to visit before you hopefully not die, but before you stop traveling. So unfortunately, igloos do not belong to our culture here in the north. They were taken from Inuits and other people in the Arctic. So, but there were massive PR campaigns marketing these glass igloos some years back by Visit Finland. And due to the popularity emerging from those campaigns amongst visitors, many entrepreneurs started calling their huts and other constructions built for Northern Lights or aurora observation igloos, even though they represented the local wooden and even traditional structures. So instead of borrowing traditions from other cultures, various actors and operators in travel industry could highlight in tourism-related representation and marketing the elements that are truly rooted in these areas. And this is how I would like to see the future, that they actually would start calling them like aurora huts. Some still do, but so many people call them something else already. And why? The reason for me is that we also, the dog sledding doesn't come from these areas. It's also what we call borrowed traditions. It was brought into Finland back in the 1980s. So my big fear is that all these borrowed and invented traditions, be it igloos, shamans, or dog sledding, they may lead to a homogeneous tourism or tourist landscape in the Arctic region, and the whole region will start resembling one another. And eventually it will be like for cruise or those who take cruises, that they don't even know which land they go into to land in, because it's all the same things that are sold in different places. And that's really sad, because there's so many rich and diverse cultures up in the Arctic that differ from one another. So I hope that people will be proud and brave enough to actually promote the things that come from their own culture, instead of, well, it's hard, but taking the shortcut of promoting something that was found out to be a good thing, which necessarily doesn't have anything to do with reality. But I understand, Lapland has its biggest brand, which is Santa Claus, and some people may say that he doesn't exist, so what can we do? So thank you.
Thank you, Kirsi. So yeah, at this point, I would like to invite questions from the audience. A slightly odd situation for me, and I can't see any of you as an audience, but I believe that you can raise a hand and ask 2 questions. Do we have any questions that have come through the Q&As? Okay. No. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and let you ask.
Brilliant. I think we solved it, Nicholas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I do have some more questions, but let's see. Okay, so I mean, actually, one further thing that I am interested to ask is, I mean, it's probably a very big question, but I mean, is the idea of sustainable travel paradoxical in itself? You know, so here we're thinking about the impact of climate change, what this means. Are we at a point where potentially, you know, people should stop traveling, or, you know, how can it be done differently? Do any of you guys have opinions about that? So, you know, that actually to discuss sustainable travel at all is kind of a difficult situation. And here I'm not advocating that people should stop living. So
I think with all sustainable travel, I just think it's going to there'll be less actual travel, so you won't nip over for you won't nip to Singapore for the Grand Prix, but you will go and then make it 3 weeks of kind of spending a week in Singapore, spending a week in Malaysia, spending a week in southern Thailand or something like that. I think that you will start to work out where your money goes, because I think if you follow the money, then you follow what the impact of that money has. So I think that that's what people will start to ask a bit more of the question of. But I also think that some people don't care, and it's really hard to engage them. And so I'm like being idealistic, but on my own street there are people who want to just go to Mallorca and spend, and there's no offense against Mallorca because it is wonderful, but they don't care where they stay. They just want a pool. It's really rubbish weather in the UK, and they just want to go on holiday. So like we're being idealistic and realistic at the same time.
Yeah, I think the question I ask is one that's a very, like, you know, extreme situation, but like it, you know, looking at this discussion and having it and what it means. But
we are in extreme times. That's the problem. Like this is beyond pledges. It's the world is literally on fire. And I'm not a kind of, you know, hippy dippy. This is realistic pounds, shillings and pence problems that we're all going to have. So yeah, it makes a huge difference how you spend your money.
Absolutely. And we have a question from Tanya. She says that she would like to hear about what the roles that artists could be. And if you have any examples on how artists have been involved in a tourist destination setting, local or from other places. She hasn't put it to anyone specifically, so if anyone feels confident to talk about how you would see artists involved in tourism. Oh, Ketut, are you something?
Yes.
Oh, you're back on mute again. Yeah, I think while Ketut, I mean, I think Kirsi's presentation, which, you know, uses Kitty Soma, sorry, Soma Kitty, illustration in itself is kind of having artists thinking about how you communicate values. But I think, I mean, for me in thinking about this debate between artists how artists can influence. I'm also thinking about there's many options where like you can communicate. They can also create something to travel to, but that also that there are many artists whose practices are more social, and actually what they do is look to bring people together and kind of work with creating community. They work with things like food, and actually thinking about how some of those like non-physical, more social practices can also be learned from. But I think it's not something that I've seen so many examples from before. So I don't know if any of you have any of those. I mean, Kirsi, certainly it's embedded into your presentation. But Ketut, are you trying to come off mute? I'm not sure.
Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead, Kirsi.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Yeah, it's quite hard to answer that question, but what I think, and also in your previous question, what you asked about sustainable tourism, and that is actually it's such a hard question. That is there any way that tourism can be sustainable, except if you just go to your next door forest or place, whatever you have in the local vicinity. But about the images we used by Sunna Kitti, actually, I was thinking about it. We would have not been able to do it without the inner understanding of the culture, or it would have, even though it would have taken a lot more hours to try to explain what we were trying to say with the images, like those first two images, what we have were the shaman, and then one with which is on our website, which actually now I post. I think I said that I'm going to post the website. So these two images is like, even when we just told Sunna the idea, or the idea that we're going to have these ethical guidelines, she immediately had that image of the misrepresentation already, because it's so strong and it's been so prevalent for such a long time. And I think about sustainable tourism, why tourism still matters a lot. It's not only the financial benefits that hopefully the local societies get, but it's also about broadening your worldview and understanding better the difference and how many different people there are in the world. Because I'm an ex-traveler, I would say. I traveled from the mid 80s till early 2000s, until I got kind of like tired of it. So so it has changed totally my perspective on how I see the world, and it has that important role. But for artists, it's quite interesting. There's that one forest bath in one, it's Arboretum. It's a place where they got foreign plants down in the southern Finland, and they have those wooden sculptures there, and some of them are made by Finnish people, and some are made by artists. And it's quite interesting that the ones that are made by the people who lived in Finland, and where the forest, as we see, is a natural part of your kind of like existence, even though we're quite urban, quite many people have summer cottages where you spend your time in the forest. So so for the ones who come from outside, what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes it takes me a while to understand what they want to say with the art, because it doesn't actually show the inner understanding I have of the forest. And also sometimes the pieces of art are based on the stereotypical images, what you think that the other place or people or represent. So it's a tricky one. And I mean, it's brilliant that we do have artists, because it makes life and the whole world such a lot brighter place. And same with tourism. it is important, but if one day we could find a balance between all these things, kind of like what can you use when it's inspiration, when it's cultural appropriation, which is the word is kind of like in crisis, I would say. But those are so hard things to actually even to understand, not alone to solve them. But the whole world is interesting but controversial place to live in, especially in these times, as Amy just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Amy just sent me a little message saying that she has a small emergency and has to dash out, which is fine. But thank you so much for participating, Amy, and for everything that you've put into this. It's been really
Thank you very
fantastic.
much. Thank you. Sorry, my son, children.
It's
don't.
okay.
Okay, bye.
But thank you.
Bye, Amy.
And I mean, I think just quickly responding to what you're saying, I mean, I think that it's really, I mean, we were recently working with a group of scientists, biologists, and it was really interesting their take on how art could engage with what they were doing was that art had the potential to ask many questions without having to file a report on them afterwards and actually, or even prove their responses, and that they thought this gave them a huge possibility to be able to explore more philosophically the implications of what they were doing, rather than the kind of practicalities of and economies, which I think has great potential. And I mean, also, I think over the coming weeks and the next sessions, we'll be talking more about how architects, can be involved in this, and how artists can be involved in thinking about, relationships to tourism, people, understandings of place, relationships between community and where you are. But I think that, thank you, Ketut, and thank you, Kirsi, for helping us kind of get this view on how tourism is being thought about and influencing in the places where you are. And so as we kind of come to round off, I mean, I want to say, as I said at the beginning, this event is one of the first in a series of 5 as part of a larger project where we're looking to rethink tourism, particularly through this lens of architecture, art and community. And so more details I'm just going to add into the chat. More details can be found at praxisoslo.org, which is our website. There you can also find, if it's of interest to people, the opportunity to browse Praxis Presents, which is our kind of online channel for art and ideas, which is released currently monthly. And the latest issues titled Rely on an Environment, so it may have some interesting overlaps. I'll also add this. We look to keep our events free and accessible to as many people as possible. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's wonderful to have an audience with you. I have to say, it's slightly odd in this particular situation not to be able to get any sense of you as you are out there. But if you have enjoyed this, and if you enjoy things like Praxis Presents or other events that we offer, you can help us keep going by supporting us through Patreon, which there's also a little link just above the website link there. It's, small donations from like €1 a month actually collectively help us keep doing the work that we do and bringing people together and looking to highlight conversations and develop knowledge around them. So and so thank you so much to Ketut and Kirsi and to all of the partners who've been part of making this series and will be part of making the future aspects of this series possible. It's been really nice talking to you.